Welcome back, everyone, to the deep dive. Today we're diving into something that I think is really, really important for anybody in retail who's, looking at all this AI stuff.
Absolutely.
How do you actually make the investment worth it? Like, how do you get a real return on it? So, we've got a lot of information to go through,
Mhm.
but we really want to focus in on one thing that I think can kind of get lost sometimes, all the excitement around this technology. It's the people, right? The
Yeah.
actual people who have to use this every day.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, we talk about AI as as this transformative thing, but the reality is that the numbers show a pretty significant gap between what people are spending and what they're actually seeing in terms of value.
Yeah, for sure. And there's a statistic that I think really drives that home. Something like 74% of companies, they just aren't getting that big, that significant value at scale from their AI investments.
Right.
So I think what that really highlights is, it's not just about having the absolute most advanced algorithm or, the shiniest new platform. It's really about, are the people across the organization from the associates in the store all the way up to the executive team, are they actually embracing and using these tools every single day? That seems to be the real difference maker.
Yeah. And I think that when you layer on top of that, the very competitive nature of the retail industry with often very, very thin margins,
Yeah.
and competition that's just relentless, it really becomes essential to maximize the ROI from every technology investment, and especially AI, which has the potential to be so transformative. I mean, when
Yeah.
you see it adopted, when you see people using it, it stops being just another cost center,
Right.
and it really starts to become a driver of performance.
Yeah, and we're talking about, potentially millions of dollars in difference in terms of sales. If you compare retailers who have really embraced AI and those who are kind of lagging behind, and think about the impact on things like how quickly you can turn over your inventory, how much you can reduce those really frustrating stockouts.
Yeah.
So, what we're really aiming to do today in this deep dive is give you practical insights on, how do you actually measure if people are using your AI tools? How do you put in place effective change management strategies?
Yeah.
And then also, how do you even start to see how your efforts compare to what's happening in other industries, right?
Right.
So we're going to be looking at some really concrete strategies, some real world examples to hopefully help you boost AI adoption and make sure those investments truly pay off with, enthusiastic widespread use.
Yeah. And I think to kind of get into it, to get to the heart of it, I think it's easy to be captivated by the kind of technical sophistication of AI.
Oh, yeah.
But as that figure about the 74% shows, the real power of AI is unlocked when people actually start using it.
Absolutely right. It's like you could have the most powerful, incredible AI-driven machine just sitting there on your warehouse floor, but if nobody knows how to turn it on, how to operate it correctly, it's useless.
Right.
And, it's the same with AI in retail. You can have, let's say you have a really sophisticated AI system that can really predict upcoming sales trends. But if the merchandising team doesn't trust it, if they ignore those forecasts, they just keep relying on their old ways of doing things.
Right.
Well, that AI is basically a very expensive paperweight.
Yeah. And we see this kind of wasted potential all over, in all kinds of retail functions. Sales forecasting AI that's never consulted, customer service chatbots that staff don't trust, leading to continued overload on the call centers. The list really does go on. And as we touched on, I mean, in retail, failing to get a good return on your AI, it's not just, it's not a small problem.
Right.
It's actually a pretty significant business risk.
Yeah, and just thinking back to that competitor that we mentioned, the one that's really using their AI for demand forecasting, and they've got really high adoption among their teams.
Yeah.
They're making much smarter decisions about what to stock, where to stock it. They're avoiding overstock. They're minimizing those empty shelves that really drive customers crazy.
Right.
And meanwhile, you might have a retailer with a similar AI system, but low engagement, They're still struggling with all the same old inventory problems and potentially losing, millions in sales as a result.
Yeah. And I think this is where the idea of, user adoption metrics becomes really, really crucial. These are not just numbers.
Yeah.
They're actually early indicators of whether your AI projects are actually gaining traction, whether they're becoming part of the workflow or if there are roadblocks to that adoption. And, to think of it another way, they're really the KPIs for the human side of your AI initiatives.
Okay, so let's get practical. What are some of the main AI tools that we're starting to see in retail, and how do you actually gauge if people are using them right?
So there are so many tools that are being deployed by retailers all over the place. But let's focus in on a few key areas
Mm.
and the metrics that kind of give you a clear picture of what adoption looks like.
Okay, so let's start with AI-powered inventory and supply chain systems.
Okay.
So we're talking about those platforms that are predicting demand, automating the reordering process, trying to optimize that whole flow of goods, and even like suggest moving stock between different store locations.
Right.
So how do you know if the people responsible for this are actually listening to these AI insights, right?
So there are a couple of really important metrics that you want to keep an eye on. Active usage is really important.
Okay.
How many of your planners, your inventory planners, your supply chain managers, are actually logging into the system on a daily or weekly basis? Are they looking at these forecasts? And then you've got recommendation acceptance rate. So what percentage of the AI suggestions, these are things like, specific order quantities,
Okay.
the transfer suggestions,
Right.
are they being accepted by your staff? And are they actually being acted on?
Oh, okay. So it's not just about whether they look at it, it's
Yeah.
are they taking action, right?
Exactly. And a rising acceptance rate is a great sign that your employees are starting to trust the insights that the AI is providing.
Hmm.
And, these systems are using machine learning, to analyze huge amounts of historical sales data, even external factors, things like weather patterns, to try and predict demand with a surprisingly high level of accuracy.
Okay.
And understanding that AI is not just guessing, but it's learning from data
Yeah.
can really help build that trust among your inventory planners.
Makes sense. Yeah, if it's consistently giving them, pretty accurate suggestions, they're naturally going to be more willing to kind of go with it, right? What else should we be looking at in this area?
So completion rate is another one.
Right.
If the AI suggests, let's say, 100 specific actions, what percentage of those are actually implemented?
Okay.
So that gives you an idea of whether the advice is not only being accepted, but put into practice.
Yeah.
And then finally, monitoring usage trends over time.
Okay.
So are people consistently using the tool, particularly after those really busy periods? Like think about seasonal peaks, major merchandising changes. If you see usage dropping off, it might suggest people are reverting to older, maybe less efficient methods when the pressure is on.
Yeah, so it's not just about the initial, like, okay, everybody's excited, we got the new system, but you're really looking over the long haul.
Right,
Well,
exactly,
are
exactly.
people sticking with it?
Yep.
Okay, so moving on now to customer service. We're seeing a lot of AI chatbots and virtual assistants popping up, online in stores,
Right.
helping customers, sometimes even helping our own staff get information. So how do you measure if these digital helpers are actually being used?
So for customer-facing chatbots, a big one is conversation completion rate.
Okay.
What percentage of customer inquiries are actually fully resolved by the chatbot?
Without having to go to a person.
Exactly, without needing to go to an agent.
Mm-hmm.
Now, for those internal AI assistants, the ones that your employees are using,
Right.
you're going to want to track queries per user.
Okay.
So are your employees actually turning to the AI, to get the information they need to do their job? And importantly, get those response quality ratings. So direct feedback from your staff. How useful are they finding the AI assistant? How accurate is it? Because it's not just about whether they're using it.
Yeah.
It's about whether it's actually helpful.
Right, because if it's not giving them good answers, they're just going to stop. Right?
Exactly. Exactly.
What other metrics should we be thinking about in this area?
So for those customer-facing chatbots,
Yeah.
the deflection rate is huge. So this is the percentage of total customer inquiries that are actually being handled by the AI.
Okay.
So this really tells you how much is it lightening the load for your agents.
Okay.
And then for internal AI assistants, keep an eye on active users.
Mm.
How many of your store employees are engaging with the AI on a monthly basis? And is that number going up over time
Okay.
as more locations adopt it? If you see low active users despite a big rollout, that should definitely be a red flag for you.
Okay, so that's something to watch out for.
Mhm.
Now let's talk about AI-driven personalization.
Okay.
All those engines that are trying to make our websites and our emails and even our in-store offers feel, kind of custom made for each shopper.
Right.
A lot of that stuff happens behind the scenes, but how do you know if it's actually working, if it's effective, if your marketing teams are managing it properly?
Yeah. So this is an interesting one because, the users in this case are really your customers and also your internal marketing team.
Okay.
So for customers, a big metric is coverage.
Okay.
What percentage of those customer interactions are actually being influenced by AI recommendations?
Oh.
For the employee side, you're going to look at engagement. How often are your marketing team members
Hmm.
logging into that AI platform, to tweak campaigns, to review performance?
Hmm.
A really high login frequency tells you they're adopting it, they're managing it.
Yeah.
But a set it and forget it kind of approach might mean it's not being used enough. Maybe there's a lack of understanding. And you also want to look at those outcome metrics that are tied to personalization.
Okay.
So things like an increase in conversion rates, a rise in your average order value.
Right. So the actual results.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And if you're seeing stagnant KPIs, it could mean that either the AI is not really effective for you or it's not being used and optimized the way it could be.
Yeah, that makes sense. If those key indicators aren't moving, then something's not working, right?
Exactly.
Okay, so what about all the data that we're collecting in retail? I mean, a lot of companies are now using those analytics dashboards, often with AI kind of built in, to spot those patterns, the anomalies in everything from sales figures to, how many people are walking into the store.
Yeah.
So how do we know if people are actually using those AI insights right?
So with these AI-driven dashboards, a good place to start is login frequency.
Okay.
Are your key managers, analysts, are they logging in regularly?
Okay.
So are your store managers checking their dashboards daily? How about your merchandising teams? Are they looking at those AI-powered forecasts? You also want to take a look at feature adoption rate. So, if your dashboard has new AI-powered features, like maybe something that explains a sudden spike in sales or something,
Okay.
are people actually using it?
Yeah, are they trying it out?
Exactly.
All right.
And if not, if usage is low, it could be that those AI capabilities are just not being used enough. You can also track time to insight.
Okay.
So is the time that it takes to actually identify and act on an emerging trend getting better?
Okay, because that's the whole point, right? To move faster, to
Exactly.
react faster.
Exactly. And if you don't see that faster reaction time, it could be that those AI insights are just being overlooked.
Okay.
And then finally, actively collect user feedback. How helpful are people finding the AI suggestions, the explanations?
Right.
If the scores are improving over time, that means the AI is adding value, which likely means increased usage.
It makes sense. Yeah, it makes sense. Now, we're also seeing, AI increasingly getting involved in those back office operations
Yeah.
through intelligent automation, sometimes called robotic process automation, RPA, using those software robots to automate all those kind of repetitive rule-based tasks,
Right.
things like invoice processing, product listing. How do you measure if people are adopting these internal AI helpers?
Yeah. So with intelligent automation, the number of processes automated is a good one to start with.
Okay.
Out of all the things that you've identified as, potential candidates for automation, how many of you actually automated using, RPA or AI? And then you want to monitor bot execution count.
Yeah.
So are those automated processes running regularly? Are they running as intended?
Okay.
If you're seeing low execution counts, it might mean that people are reverting back to doing things manually, or there might be some problems with the automations.
Okay.
You could also look at user interaction rate. So how often are employees actually having to, manually trigger or oversee those automations? If people are skipping those automated tasks in favor of, just doing it the old way, that's a sign of either poor adoption or a lack of trust in how reliable it is.
Mm.
And, if you see a really high percentage of end-to-end automated transactions, that shows strong acceptance, strong confidence. And then finally, track those error rates or exceptions.
Okay.
High error rates, that can really erode trust in automation.
Yeah, for sure.
So if you can work to lower those error rates, that really builds confidence and it encourages more reliance.
So it really sounds like across the board here, it's critical to not just implement the technology, but really keep track of, who is using it, how often are they using it, are they actually finding it valuable in their everyday work?
Exactly. Exactly. And it's important to remember that adoption, it's not uniform across a retail organization.
Right.
So your e-commerce team, they might be really quick to embrace a new AI recommendation engine,
Yeah.
whereas your teams in your physical stores might be a little slower to adopt a new inventory tool.
Yeah.
And that's why it's so important to segment your adoption metrics by, by location, by region, by department.
Right, because it's going to be different. Different people will be at different places. So
Exactly. Exactly. And that will help you pinpoint the areas that needed more attention, more support.
So I think the key takeaway here is that, retail executives, they really need to treat these user adoption metrics, for their key AI systems with the same importance and scrutiny that they give to, things like their sales figures and their inventory levels. You need to be seeing those dashboards. You need that regular monitoring.
Absolutely.
You need to be focusing on the human element just as much as you're focusing on the tech.
Exactly. And, even if you've got the most cutting-edge AI tools and you've got crystal clear adoption metrics in place,
Yeah.
you're still not guaranteed success.
Yeah.
And that's where, the critical role of change management really comes into play.
Yeah, and it's so true. Even the most brilliant AI implementation can stumble, can fail if your employees aren't willing or prepared to use it.
Absolutely.
Change management. I know sometimes it sounds like, kind of corporate jargon, but really, when you boil it down, it's about guiding people through transitions.
Mm.
And when you're talking about AI in retail, it's so crucial,
Yeah.
especially with these, often really large geographically dispersed workforces, and people are used to doing things in a certain way, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
It kind of reminds me of, how challenging it was for a lot of retailers to even adopt e-commerce, right? When that was kind of the new thing. Are there some similar lessons there, do you think, that apply now?
I think that's such a good parallel. Just like with e-commerce, one of the foundational elements of successful change management, when you're thinking about AI, is really communicating a clear vision
Mm-hmm.
and not just, communicating it once.
Yeah.
It's got to be consistent.
Over and over.
Exactly. Frontline employees, middle management, they need to understand the why.
Right.
Why are we introducing AI? It's not enough to just say, hey, head office has decided this is what we're doing.
Right.
You have to actually explain,
Yeah. What's the benefit to me?
exactly what's in it for me.
Right.
How is this going to actually help me in my day-to-day work?
Right. You really need to paint that picture, right? Like, this AI is going to make your job easier. It's going to lead to better outcomes. So, for instance, really explaining how that AI-powered inventory management system is directly going to prevent stockouts, right? It's going to reduce those manual checks. It's going to contribute to more sales and happy customers.
Absolutely. And this communication has to be, frequent. It has to be transparent. It has to come from multiple levels of leadership.
Oh, okay.
So think about utilizing things like town hall meetings,
Mhm.
send out clear memos, even create those short, engaging explainer videos
Yeah, those are really helpful.
that show those new AI tools in action and highlight the benefits. If you're getting that consistent messaging from the top, that emphasizes AI as a strategic priority, that this is a genuine investment in the employees. That can really go a long way to kind of rallying the team and reducing resistance.
Yeah.
You also want to acknowledge and address any concerns.
Right, because people are going to have concerns.
Exactly. And, things like fears about job displacement,
Yeah.
fears about, big changes to their roles. And you got to do that honestly, with empathy, with reassurance about the company's intentions. Set up those open and accessible communication channels.
Mm,
Maybe think about an internal Q&A forum specifically for the AI rollout.
that's a good idea.
That encourages dialogue. It allows employees to actually voice their concerns. You can address those anxieties head on.
Yeah. And, another strategy that seems to be really smart is to start with those pilot users,
Yeah.
right? Those internal champions.
Yeah.
You're not trying to do everything like across the whole company all at once, right?
No, you really want to identify those early adopters,
Mhm.
those individuals who are, a little bit more tech savvy,
Yeah.
those who are just enthusiastic about new tech, and really enlist them as champions for your AI tools.
Right.
So pilot the AI in, a select group of stores,
Hmm.
or even just the specific team. Find those people who really grasp the value
Mm.
and who become proficient really quickly, and empower them to share their experiences.
Okay.
So those internal case studies, presentations by colleagues, these could be so much more powerful
Yeah. Yeah.
than, a formal corporate kind of top-down approach.
Because if you see your coworker, benefiting from it, using it, and it's making their job easier,
Exactly.
that's gonna, that's gonna get you more excited about it, right?
Yeah. It builds trust and it encourages wider adoption. And those champions can also serve as those peer trainers.
Oh, right.
They
Yeah.
can provide that ongoing, on-the-job support.
Mhm.
So it really creates a network of expertise beyond your kind of formal training program.
Yeah.
And having a local, trusted, internal evangelist in each region, in
Yeah.
each department.
Yeah, like a go-to person, right?
Exactly. They speak the same language as the end users.
Right.
And they can really help bridge the gap between the central technology teams and your frontline staff.
That peer-to-peer influence it's really powerful.
Yeah. Now, even with those champions,
Yeah,
you still have to have everybody knowing how to actually use the AI.
absolutely.
And so that's where those comprehensive training programs come in.
Exactly. You have to provide comprehensive training. And one thing I think is really important to remember is that training can't be a one-time thing.
Okay.
Insufficient training is such a killer when it comes to adoption.
Yeah.
And it's really common. So you want to think about it as an ongoing, iterative process.
Hmm.
You start with good onboarding, when the AI tool is introduced. So think about those hands-on workshops, simulations, guided practice. And all of that should be within the environment that they're actually going to be using it in.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. So for example, if you're rolling out an AI-assisted point-of-sale system,
Right.
your store associates should have a chance to practice with realistic mock sale scenarios before they have to interact with real customers. Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Before they're actually, ringing up people's purchases.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And you also want to make sure that you have accessible training materials.
Okay.
So things like quick reference guides, short instructional videos, internal FAQs. These things can be so helpful for your employees on a busy day.
Absolutely.
And crucially, you actually want to track who's completing the training
Yeah.
and how effective is that training.
Yeah.
You want to be actively asking for feedback on any areas where people are still uncertain.
Yeah.
They're having difficulties. And then you want to follow up, refresher sessions, more advanced tips, maybe after people have had some real world experience using the tool.
Right.
And given, that turnover is so high in retail, you really want to make sure that AI training is a standard part of the onboarding process.
Absolutely.
For all of your new employees.
Yeah. Every new person coming in needs to understand this, right?
Exactly. Exactly. And, the goal here is really to make sure that every user feels competent, feels confident in their ability to use those tools.
Yeah.
That's going to lead to more enthusiasm and more adoption. And one group that we can't forget
Yeah.
is the managers.
Right.
They need to be trained too.
Yeah. They need to be on board.
Absolutely. And not just on how to use the tools, but also how to interpret the data.
Yeah.
The reports that are coming from the AI and how to coach their teams on how to actually use these insights.
Absolutely. They're kind of the link, right?
Exactly.
Honestly, the top and the front line.
Yeah.
Now, we touched on this before, but, it's really worth emphasizing again, I think, that it's really important to address fear to build trust.
Absolutely.
Because, bringing AI into the workplace can make some people nervous, right?
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
Yeah.
It's completely natural.
Yeah.
Concerns about job security.
Yeah, the robot's going to take my job.
Exactly. Exactly. Are they going to change what my role looks like every day?
Yeah.
These are natural reactions when new tech comes in.
Yeah.
And, good change management really needs to address that.
Yeah.
So you got to do it with empathy, with open communication, with good information. Explain the intent behind AI.
Right.
Why are we doing this? For example, emphasize that those chatbots, they're there to handle those routine, frequently asked questions.
Yeah.
So it's actually freeing up the human associates to deal with the complex stuff.
Right. The stuff that actually needs a person.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So it's not about, eliminating jobs.
Yeah.
It's about changing what those jobs look like. Involve people in the process of setting up safeguards.
Yeah. Right.
Setting up those feedback mechanisms related to AI, transparency, transparent governance. How are we using the AI? What data are we collecting? This can really build trust.
Right. If people feel like they're in the loop, they're more likely to be okay with it.
Exactly. Exactly. And, you want to actively share data that demonstrates the positive impact.
Yeah.
So, increased sales figures, maybe that's leading to the creation of new roles.
Right.
That's a tangible benefit.
Yeah. Show people that this isn't all, doom and gloom.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
And perhaps most importantly, create a workplace where people are actually encouraged to ask for help.
Yeah.
Where they feel comfortable admitting if they don't understand something.
Yeah.
A supportive supervisor and a no-blame approach.
Right.
To people making mistakes
Yeah.
while they're learning new systems.
Yeah. Make it safe to try. Right.
Exactly. Exactly. This makes people much more willing to embrace those AI tools.
Now, people are, often motivated by incentives, a little bit of friendly competition.
Sure.
What about, the strategy of incentivizing, gamifying adoption?
Yeah, I think that can be a really effective way to drive engagement, particularly at the beginning,
Yeah.
and to kind of build that positive association with these new tools.
Okay, so, how would you actually do that?
So think about incorporating adoption goals into things like management objectives.
Okay.
So set a target percentage of, auto-generated store orders that are placed using new system.
Uh-huh.
Maybe you tie the achievement of those goals to performance bonuses,
Right.
public recognition programs, and even non-monetary incentives can be surprisingly effective.
Yeah.
So think about, acknowledging your top adopters in the company newsletter.
Okay.
Maybe friendly competition between different store locations, regional teams, who can use a specific AI tool the best.
Oh, okay. That's kind of fun.
Exactly, a bit of fun. And those gamified dashboards,
Yeah.
where people or teams can earn points or badges for using the new tools.
Yeah.
Maybe they reach like expert level
Yeah.
for AI-assisted customer engagement. This stuff can really add a fun layer
Right.
of intrinsic motivation.
Yeah, you make it a game.
Exactly. Exactly. But, it's really crucial that you structure those incentives around meaningful use of the AI and the actual business outcomes that it's driving.
Right, so it's not just about, clicking buttons for the sake of clicking buttons.
Exactly. You don't want to reward just arbitrary button clicking, that superficial engagement.
Yeah.
So, for example, reward teams that show significant improvements in customer satisfaction scores,
Okay.
which can be tied back to, the effective use of those AI tools.
Right, so it has to be tied to a real result.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Now, leadership really sets the tone for the whole organization.
Yeah.
So how important is it for management, at all levels, to actually use these tools themselves?
I think it's absolutely critical. Lead by example. Management usage is not just a good idea. It's really non-negotiable.
Okay.
Retail staff at all levels are going to be looking to their managers,
Yeah.
their senior leaders for cues. If the leadership isn't using the tools, they're not referring to the AI in their own work, then, employees are going to think, well, this isn't that important.
Right.
This must be optional.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, for example, if a store manager is still using those outdated, manual inventory methods,
Right.
and they're ignoring those suggestions from the AI system,
Yeah.
well, their team's going to follow suit.
Yeah.
However, if that manager starts every team meeting by actually reviewing the AI dashboard
Right.
and using those insights to, to plan the day's tasks, that sends a really strong message
Absolutely.
about how important the technology is.
Yeah.
Similarly, executive leaders, they should be asking for that AI-generated data
Yeah.
in their reports, in meetings.
Okay.
They've got to demonstrate that they're relying on it.
Yeah.
And sometimes, to really drive adoption, you might actually need to phase out the old alternatives.